The next mistake mediators make is not pursuing a clear niche. I'll explain why it's valuable in a moment, but just so that we're all on the same page, I will first describe what I mean by a niche. Typically, a niche includes geography and subject matter expertise. If your expertise is divorce or employment issues, your geographic area will probably focus on your city. And it would serve you to narrow that niche further because there are a lot of mediators who work in those areas. Meanwhile, if your expertise is something super specific, like airline labor agreements, the relevant geographic area may be national or international. Ideally, you want to become the go-to person for the cases that fall within your niche. You want to be the first person people think of and recommend when someone asks about a mediator in your subject area. You want your niche to be small enough for you to win, and by win I mean for you to be the go-to mediator who everyone wants to work with, but you also want the niche to be broad enough for you to make good money. Civil litigation in the US, for example, is way too broad. There is no way you can dominate that niche. So if that is your expertise, it would really serve you to narrow it by industry, type of complaint, or some other factor. Here are some examples of clear niches. Divorcing couples in Houston who have a child with special needs. Sexual harassment suits in technology companies in Virginia. Small business disputes in San Diego where at least one party is of East Asian descent. Marijuana-related patent disputes in the US. Disputes between pharmaceutical companies in the US over advertising claims. These are just some examples to provide a flavor of what I'm talking about. You may be thinking that these examples are shockingly narrow, but if a niche is not sufficiently narrow, there's no way you can actually dominate it. It takes some effort, maybe some trial and error, to figure out the best niche for yourself. So you may be wondering, why is it so important to have a well-defined niche rather than just be a generalist? You are probably well aware that there is a lot of competition for paid mediation work. Urska Velikonja, while she was a research fellow at Harvard Law School, wrote an article called Making Peace and Making Money. And in that article, she talks about her research on the ADR field. And what she found was that the job market for private neutrals is similar to job markets for entertainers or professional athletes, rather than being like typical professional job markets. What that means is that a very small percentage of people are super successful while the vast majority are struggling. And this trend is only increasing. Every year, more accomplished lawyers and judges retire and decide that mediation and/or arbitration would be an excellent retirement career. Plus, there's literally no barrier to entry to become a mediator. Anyone can go print up business cards calling themselves a mediator. A 40-hour training may be required to join your local court panel, but not even that is required to get hired by private parties. So how is this related to having a niche? It's a way of distinguishing yourself from the other mediators who are out there. Now, you and I both know that an excellent mediator can mediate anything. However, the fact remains that clients want experts. Now, you might be thinking, but my expertise is mediation. I genuinely understand that. My expertise is coaching. But think about it this way. If you are having brain surgery, would you want a general surgeon or a brain surgeon? I don't think many people would prefer the general surgeon in that situation. The parties in the case have probably been struggling with whatever the issue is for years. And even though from a legal standpoint, it may be quite simple, in their world, it is not simple. If it were easy to deal with, they would have sorted it out already, right? So it makes them feel better to have someone who has a lot of experience with that specific type of dispute. And of course, this preference for people with subject matter expertise is especially true of higher dollar value mediations. Business people want specialists. And by business people, I'm including lawyers. The second reason it is advantageous to have a niche is that it narrows the competition. Instead of competing against all the mediators in St. Louis or Los Angeles or wherever you're from, you are only competing against those few people in your geographic region who have the same specialty. Third, and this is far more important than you may realize, having a clear niche focuses your attention. There are a lot of conferences you could attend, a lot of organizations for which you could be a speaker, lots of different kinds of people who you could develop relationships with. There are infinite number of options of where you can spend your time and energy. But when you get a clear idea of the fact that you want to focus on IP litigation or multicultural divorce, suddenly becomes really obvious which opportunities you should pursue. Having a clear niche also leverages client referrals. If someone in your field is looking for a mediator and they ask around and hear your name, they will consider hiring you. But if you're so well known in your community that they hear your name from multiple people, then you become not just one option, but the obvious choice. This ability to dominate a niche is absolutely impossible unless you really choose to focus and drill down in a particular subject area, a particular community, or both. Another consideration is that having a clear niche also multiplies name recognition and makes you top of mind. The principle here is the same reason that TV and radio ads play over and over again. It is the repeated exposure that makes people remember you. For example, they meet you at a networking event. A month later, they hear you speak. A few months after that, they see that you're listed as a leader of the organization. 6 months later, they see that you've written an article, right? It is this repeated exposure in the same market, in the same community, that has people start to see you as a leader and an expert in that area. I should add a little caveat here. I'm using advertising to make a point about repeated exposure, not promoting the use of advertising. When it comes to professional services, traditional forms of advertising are by far the least effective way to get clients. One final reason that a niche is helpful is that it creates the possibility for collaboration and cross-referrals with other mediators. A referral from another mediator means a lot, and that is simply not going to happen if you are competing with everyone. I often hear 3 common concerns about choosing a niche. The biggest one is that people worry about turning off prospective clients. If you describe yourself as a construction mediator or as a real estate mediator, will that turn off people who are looking to mediate an employment dispute? It might. But the truth is that it's going to attract a lot more people than it repels. And it invites referrals in a way that a general practice mediation absolutely does not. Meanwhile, your big fans, those people who think you are great and who will send you work all the time, maybe your boss or a lawyer who you've mediated a lot of cases for, or even your mom, whoever those people are, they will still send you business. Just because something is outside of your niche doesn't mean you have to say no to it, at least not necessarily. It just means that most of your proactive marketing efforts are directed at particular types of cases. The second concern that I hear from people is that this is all well and good for people who have a specialty, but what about people who don't? Maybe you were general counsel and you're used to doing everything. Or maybe you're early in your career and you just don't have that much subject matter expertise yet. Either way, you can still develop an expertise. If you happen to get a couple employment law cases where there were sexual harassment claims and you really enjoyed them, and then you were really good at them, you could try that out as a niche, right? Start promoting yourself that way. What if you've only mediated 3 cases on a particular subject? You might be thinking that you don't know enough to write about it. Some people find this scary, but other people do it all the time. Whatever your insights are, they are valid. If you're a good writer and an insightful person, you're going to be able to write something that has meaning, and that is what's important. Will someone out there disagree with you? It's possible, but so what? Different perspectives can be valid. The third concern that I sometimes hear is that people worry that it will get boring doing the same thing all the time. The first question is, do you need to make a living? If you do, deal with basics first. Once you have a certain level of business, you can worry about expanding to other areas. What I've noticed though with clients who've had this experience, and for myself as well, boredom isn't nearly the issue you imagine. Once you have a clear niche, you may start attracting cases that are much more complicated, or you might start seeing levels or approaches that you hadn't previously considered. Delving deeply into one area can be more stimulating than you might expect. So, if any concerns are cropping up for you around this idea of having a niche, I invite you to just put them aside. Irrational fears often masquerade as logical objections. But the truth is, they're just fears. So I invite you to put them aside the same way as you would with any other irrational, unhelpful fear.